The restaurant was buzzing with the usual chatter of businessmen discussing deals, families enjoying their meals, and waiters rushing from one table to another. But in one corner, by the large glass window overlooking the city, sat a man who seemed to belong to another world entirely. His presence carried a weight that made people turn their heads, even if they didn't recognize his face. He was Alexander Hayes, a billionaire known across the country for his empire in real estate and investments. To most, he was untouchable, unshakable, a man who had everything. But on this day, his eyes weren't on his food or the reports in front of him. They were on his son. Ethan was 10 years old, with bright hazel eyes and a gentle smile. But his body had betrayed him long ago. Born with cerebral palsy, his movements were stiff, his hands trembled, and feeding himself was often a painful, messy struggle. Alexander had arranged for the best therapists, the finest schools, and even personal aides. Yet here, in this public space, his son's vulnerability was on display. Every bite Ethan attempted slipped from the spoon, landing on his shirt or the table. The boy's cheeks flushed with embarrassment as other diners cast subtle glances in his direction. Alexander's chest tightened. He wanted to help, but in truth, he didn't know how. Despite all his wealth, he felt powerless in moments like these. That's when it happened. A young waitress, her name tag read Sophie, noticed the boy's struggle. She didn't hesitate, didn't pause to ask permission or second-guess her place. She simply walked over, crouched beside Ethan with a warm smile, and whispered, "May I help you, sweetheart?" Ethan nodded shyly, and Sophie took the spoon from his trembling hand. She began feeding him with patience, each movement gentle, each word of encouragement lifting the boy's spirit. Alexander's eyes widened. No one ever dared to cross the invisible boundary around him. Employees feared him, acquaintances respected him, and strangers avoided him. But this waitress, with her simple uniform and tired eyes, had done what he couldn't. She stepped into his son's world without fear, without hesitation. And in that moment, something inside Alexander shifted. Sophie's life was nothing like Alexander's. At 25, she had been working double shifts at the restaurant for months. Her mother was ill, medical bills were piling up, and her younger brother needed school fees paid. Every dollar mattered. She never imagined that a billionaire would even notice her, let alone be touched by her kindness. To Sophie, helping the boy wasn't a heroic act, it was human decency. She had grown up watching her mother feed her ailing father before he passed away, and the memory had stayed with her. But Alexander saw more than just kindness. He saw heart. Something money couldn't buy. After that day, Alexander began visiting the restaurant more often. Each time, Sophie greeted Ethan with the same tenderness. She didn't treat him like a burden or a patient. She treated him like a boy who deserved dignity. Ethan laughed more when she was around. He ate better. And slowly, he began to open up. One evening, after the restaurant had emptied, Alexander asked to speak with Sophie. His voice carried the authority of a man used to being obeyed, but there was a softness now too. "You've done something for my son that no therapist or caretaker has been able to do," he said. "You've given him joy. Confidence. I want to thank you." Sophie shook her head. "You don't need to thank me, sir. He's a wonderful boy. All he needed was patience and a little love." Alexander studied her face. It had been years since someone had spoken to him without fear or calculation. For the first time in a long time, he felt seen. But life was never so simple. Sophie's challenges were still waiting for her outside those restaurant doors. One night, after a long shift, she returned home to find her mother worse than before. The medication was too expensive, and the landlord was threatening eviction. Sophie felt the crushing weight of despair. She had no one to lean on. The next day, Alexander noticed her swollen eyes. "You've been crying," he said quietly. Sophie tried to brush it off, but Ethan, ever observant, reached for her hand and said, "Don't be sad, Sophie." That broke her. She admitted everything, the bills, the struggles, the fear of losing everything she loved. Alexander listened. For once, he wasn't thinking like a billionaire calculating risks. He was thinking like a father, like a man who had seen true kindness and wanted to repay it. "Let me help you," he said. Sophie shook her head fiercely. "I don't want charity. I don't want to be another person who owes you because you're rich. I just want to stand on my own." Those words pierced him. No one had ever refused his money. No one had ever told him they wanted dignity more than wealth. And that's when Alexander realized Sophie was exactly what he needed, not just for Ethan, but for himself. The journey ahead was not without struggles. People gossiped. A billionaire spending time with a waitress raised eyebrows. Sophie faced whispers at work, even jealousy from colleagues. Alexander faced skepticism from his board members, who thought he was distracted. But neither cared. Ethan began improving. With Sophie's encouragement, he practiced feeding himself, smiling through every spill. She believed in him when others only pitied him. And slowly, Alexander too began to believe not just in his son's progress, but in the possibility of love he thought he'd lost forever after his wife's passing. Months later, on a quiet afternoon in the park, Alexander watched as Sophie helped Ethan take his first few steps with the aid of braces. The boy's laughter rang through the air, pure and victorious. Alexander felt tears sting his eyes. He turned to Sophie and said, "You've changed his life. You've changed mine." Sophie smiled through her own tears. "No, Mr. Hayes. He just needed someone to believe in him. And maybe, so did you." In that moment, Alexander knew. He had spent his life building empires of steel and glass, but the greatest treasure he had ever found was standing right in front of him, a young woman with a kind heart who reminded him of what truly mattered. Challenges they faced. Sophie's financial struggles, her sick mother, and the constant fear of losing her home. Alexander's inability to emotionally connect with his son despite his wealth. Society's judgment of a billionaire and a waitress forming a bond. Ethan's daily battle with his disability and his own self-confidence. Resolution. Together, they overcame each challenge, not through wealth or pity, but through love, patience, and faith in one another. Alexander helped Sophie's mother receive proper medical care, but only after Sophie agreed to accept it as a partnership, not charity. Ethan grew stronger, braver, and happier. And slowly, love blossomed between Alexander and Sophie, a love built not on money, but on the simple act of kindness that started it all. And so, what began as a waitress feeding a disabled boy in a restaurant became the story of a family being rebuilt, of lives forever changed by compassion. It was proof that sometimes, the smallest acts of kindness carry the greatest power. Sparkle's call to action for viewers. If this story touched your heart, please share your thoughts in the comments below. I'd love to hear from you. Your words matter, and your kindness can inspire others. Don't forget to like this video, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you never miss a new story. This is your channel, Be Kind Always, where every story reminds us of the power of compassion.